questions are on your mind. Now, with that said, we've heard the term condemnation and inverse condemnation. When people say condemnation, they're talking about a direct condemnation, which is the same thing as eminent domain. That is, a governmental agency or some other legal entity that the government has given the power of eminent domain to wants your property, you don't want to sell it, so they can file a lawsuit. It'll be entitled SDG&E versus Smith, or whatever the property owner's name is. And then they can force a sale of that property. Now, inverse condemnation is still the taking or damaging of private property for a public project, but the parties are reversed. So they may not bring a direct condemnation action against you. They might just take your property or damage it without even filing a suit, in which case the property owner would be the one to file the case. And then it'd be Smith versus SDG&E, but it's the same principle. And that principle is set out in the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights with the U.S. Constitution, and it's in both the California Constitution as well. And the principle is that regardless of whether this is a good project or a bad project, private property cannot be taken or damaged for a public project unless just compensation is first paid to the property owner. And in California, the amount of compensation is determined by a jury of your peers, unless you waive it. And I strongly recommend that you do not waive that right to a jury trial, because that's the one thing you've got going for you in a case like this. If you choose to, you can get 12 jurors of your peers to sit in a box, and hear this story from beginning to end, and then they fill in the blank as to what they think is fair. So the amount of compensation is not decided by a judge or a panel of experts hired by the government or by SDG&E's appraisers or anybody else. It's by lay people. And the system, although it's slow and cumbersome, works remarkably well. So let me tell you a little bit about what compensation a property owner would be entitled to. First and foremost, you're entitled to a fair price for the land that's taken. So you're entitled to the fair market value. Now, fair market value's got a legal definition that's unique to eminent domain cases. It's the highest price that anybody would pay you on a specific date, knowing everything there is to know about the property, what it could be used for. Now, that's a different definition than you see in a lot of other contexts. Like if you went to get a loan on your property, market value would be defined as the average price or the most likely price or something along those lines. But because it's a forced sale, you're entitled to the highest price. And it's the highest price based on the highest and best use of your property. So if there was no eminent domain case, and there was a hypothetical purchaser who wanted to buy your property, what's the highest price they would pay for it? Now, it's not the lowest price based on the lowest and worst price. So it all depends on which angle you're looking at this from. And that's why you want a jury trial. Now, in addition to the value of the property that's being taken, if they're only taking a part of your property and then leaving you some remaining property, you may be entitled to damages to the remaining property. And in a case like this, those damages to your remaining property that you're left with could be a lot more than the strip of land that they're taking, because you're going to have to live with these towers and the fear of the health concerns and the fire concerns and everything. I mean, you have a new neighbor, okay? And if the remainder of your property is worth less after this project is in than it would have been worth if the project had never gone in, then you're entitled to that difference, to those severance damages. And what a jury is asked to do is use this flip chart that we saw just a minute ago, which is really a remarkable exhibit, by the way. I mean, it's so simple, and it is right on. Because what a jury or what an appraiser would have to do is actually do two appraisers. He he would appraise your 34 acres, assuming it's this pristine land with a house on it or whatever the improvements are. Then he would do another appraisal under a totally different scenario. He would flip that chart over and then say, okay, now you've got these industrial towers on the property. Would somebody pay the same amount per acre for that property with these towers on it that they would without the towers? Well, the answer is obviously not. I mean, if you had two identical pieces of property, they were the same in every respect, but one of them had these monstrous towers through the middle of it, and one did not, you would choose the one that didn't have the towers on it. Now, if you got a discount, if you got it a lot cheaper, at some point you might go, well, those towers aren't quite as ugly as I thought they were. But the question is, how much of a discount? That's the severance damage. Now, SDG&E and other condemning agencies do not like paying the highest price for property. And if they hate to buy property, they really hate to pay for property that they're not even getting. And so there's a very strong bias against paying severance damage. But it would be a total fiction to ignore it. I mean, to pretend that you can cut this property in half with these towers and that there's no injury is ludicrous. But I see it happening over and over again. The thing that you need to be concerned with is that you don't really choose the timing of these eminent domain cases. But that's where you need to make your stand, at least financially. Because if you are going to recover any damages like this, you need to do it in the eminent domain case when it's filed. Because if you agree to take a certain amount of money from SDG&E, they come out and make you an offer that they tell you is very fair. If you accept it and take the money, they'll have you sign a release saying that you will never again ask for more money as a result of this project. So if you settle the case, because it's just too much of a headache or you don't want to have to deal with it, and then you realize a year or two later what you're dealing with, it's too late at that point. You're going to be barred. So what you have to do is anticipate what effect this is going to have on your property in the future. And that's what I help with, and that's what a team of experts help with, appraisers. Appraisers come in all different flavors, if you will. Some very high, some very low, and you can guess who's on whose team. But you just need to make sure that both sides get presented in a case like this. Now, if you own a business that operates on the property, there's a potential for claiming loss of business goodwill, which is lost profits in effect. If you need to move some things off of the right-of-way or off the property, you're entitled to relocation expenses in addition to that. Now, some of the pitfalls that I see property owners get in trouble with early in these cases. The first, probably most important, I don't think applies here tonight. But many people think that you just can't fight City Hall. I mean, it's not worth it, or you can't do it economically, or if the government comes in with the bulldozers, there's no way to resist. And just the fact that you're here tonight tells me that you don't fall in that category. But you can't stand up for these rights, and you can do it in a way that makes economic sense.